The desert at night was a place of silence so deep it pressed against a man's ears. Every sound, wind brushing over sand, a coyote's distant call, the faint creak of saddle leather, echoed louder than it had any right to. The cowboy rode alone, his hat pulled low, a thin cigar smoldering between his lips. His horse's hooves crunched over dry gravel, each step carrying him farther into the emptiness. He had no destination. Loneliness was both his compass and his curse. Towns offered no peace, only whiskey and staring eyes. Camps along the trail gave him food and firelight, but no belonging. So, he drifted. A man without ties, carrying only his revolver, his worn saddlebag, and a past he never spoke of. It was under a swollen desert moon, silver and unblinking, that he heard it. A cry. Faint at first, so fragile he thought it was the wind. He slowed his horse, listening. Again it came, a thin, broken wail carried across the sand. The sound did not belong in this place. Coyotes howled, vultures circled, men cursed and bled here, but children did not cry in the desert at midnight. The cowboy dismounted, boots sinking into the cold sand. He tugged the reins to steady his horse and walked toward the sound. Every sense sharpened. His hand hovered near his revolver. A child's cry could be bait, a cruel trick used by bandits. Yet something in the sound pierced deeper than caution. It was raw, aching, desperate. Behind a cluster of mesquite bushes he found it. A boy, no older than 8 or 9, curled into the dirt. The child's clothes were torn, face streaked with dust and tears. His lips were cracked, his body trembling with hunger and cold. The boy lifted his head weakly as the cowboy approached, eyes wide with terror and hope. "Easy now," the cowboy muttered, kneeling down. His voice was rough, unused to gentleness. "Ain't no harm meant." The boy tried to speak but only coughed, his voice rasping. The cowboy pulled a canteen from his belt and tilted it carefully to the child's lips. The boy drank greedily, water spilling down his chin. When the coughing eased, he whispered a single word. "Mama." The cowboy's chest tightened. He scanned the darkness, half expecting to find others nearby, but the desert stretched empty in every direction. He lifted the boy gently, feeling how light he was, nothing but skin and bones. "Where's your ma, kid?" he asked. The boy shook his head, eyes filling again with tears. No answer came, only the quiet sobs of exhaustion. The cowboy carried him back to the horse, settling him carefully across the saddle. He mounted behind, cradling the boy against his chest. Bond he had not sought, but could not deny. The boy stirred, mumbling half-formed words. Among them, the cowboy caught another. "Fire." The word was filled with dread. "Fire?" the cowboy asked quietly, but the boy had already drifted into a fitful sleep, his breath shallow against the cowboy's chest. The desert wind rose, carrying with it a hint of smoke. The cowboy narrowed his eyes, scanning the horizon. Far to the east, under the pale glow of the moon, a faint smudge of black wavered against the stars. Smoke. The boy had not wandered here by chance. Something had driven him into the desert. Something had burned behind him. The cowboy tightened his grip on the reins, the weight of choice settling heavy on his shoulders. He could ride away, leave the boy at the nearest town, and wash his hands of the trouble. Or he could follow the smoke, step into whatever hell had spit this child out. For the first time in many years, he did not feel like a man without destination. The cry in the desert had given him one, and as the moon rode high above the endless sand, the lonely cowboy carried the starving orphan into a dawn that promised both answers and danger. The boy stirred in the cowboy's arms as dawn painted the desert sky in streaks of rose and gold. His eyelids fluttered, his lips cracked and dry, and a faint whisper slipped out. "Fire, Mama." The cowboy reined in his horse and slid to the ground, easing the child onto a blanket spread over the sand. He dug into his saddlebag, pulling out a strip of jerky and a heel of stale bread. The boy gnawed weakly, chewing as though every bite took all the strength left in him. His eyes darted constantly, as if some nightmare still chased him across the waking world. The cowboy crouched, voice low and steady. "What happened, kid? Where'd you come from?" The boy looked at him with wide, haunted eyes. He opened his mouth, but no words came, only a strangled sound that ended in tears. He pressed his fists into his eyes and shook his head. The cowboy exhaled slowly. He wasn't good with children, never had been. But he recognized fear when he saw it, and this boy's fear wasn't ordinary. It was carved deep, like a brand no water or time could wash away. "Take your time," the cowboy muttered, tearing a strip of jerky into smaller pieces. He fed the boy bit by bit until the trembling in his hands eased. After a long silence, the child finally spoke. His voice was barely more than a whisper. "They came at night, men on horses, torches. They shouted, and then fire." His little chest heaved. "Mama told me to run." The cowboy's jaw tightened. He had seen raids before, outlaws sweeping through homesteads, burning what they could not steal, killing what they could not carry. It was the law of the wild frontier, written in blood and smoke. But no matter how many times he had witnessed it, the thought of a child left behind in the ashes twisted his gut. "Your ma?" he asked carefully. The boy shook his head slowly. "She didn't follow. I looked back, and I saw—" His voice cracked, the words drowned in sobs. The cowboy rested a rough hand on the boy's shoulder. He didn't push further. He didn't need the details. The smoke on the horizon told enough. Still, one word cut through the haze of grief. "Torches." The cowboy lifted his gaze eastward, toward the faint plume that smudged the sky. The boy hadn't wandered far from the ruins. The raiders might still be there, stripping what remained, or they might already be riding hard for the next homestead. "Kid," the cowboy said, voice firm but not unkind. "If you stay out here, you'll die. If I take..." Into his arms. "All right, kid. You're with me now." They rode on, the desert giving way to scattered rocks and gullies. The boy slept fitfully, sometimes whimpering in his dreams. The cowboy's thoughts churned with questions. Who were the raiders? Why strike a lonely homestead in the dead of night? And most of all, why had they left the boy alive? By noon, the sun blazed overhead, heat shimmering off the ground. The cowboy led the horse into the shade of a jagged outcrop. He poured a trickle of water into a tin cup and handed it to the boy, who drank greedily. The boy's eyes, clearer now, fixed on the cowboy. "Why did you stop?" he asked in a small, hoarse voice. The cowboy frowned. "What do you mean?" "You heard me cry. You could have kept riding. Men don't stop for orphans." The cowboy felt the words strike deep. He searched the boy's gaze and found not innocence, but a weary knowledge no child should carry. He didn't answer right away. "Finally," he said. "Maybe I've been riding too long without a reason. Maybe you're it." The boy lowered his head, silent, but his fingers clung tighter to the cowboy's coat. They rested until the heat softened, then mounted up again. As they rode, the boy suddenly straightened, pointing back toward the east. "They'll come," he whispered. "They'll come for me." The cowboy glanced where the boy pointed. Far across the shimmering horizon, dust plumes stirred, faint but rising. Riders. He muttered a curse under his breath. The boy's secret was heavier than he'd realized. He wasn't just an orphan of fire. He was a target. The raiders hadn't overlooked him. They were hunting him. The cowboy's hand fell to the revolver at his hip. His loneliness had always been a shield, keeping him out of other people's wars. But now, with a starving orphan pressed against him and riders closing in, he knew he had crossed a line he could never ride back from. As the desert wind howled across the sand, the cowboy spurred his horse toward the jagged hills. He didn't know what awaited there, safety or ambush. But he knew one thing with burning certainty. He would not abandon the boy. Not now. Not ever. 1,000. The sun sank, slow and bloody, staining the horizon crimson as the cowboy urged his horse into the broken ridges. The boy clung tight against him, silent now, though his wide eyes darted toward the east where the dust plumes still rose. Riders were coming. How many, the cowboy could not say. But they were not friendly, and they were not far. By the time the first stars pricked the sky, he had found shelter in a shallow canyon. The rock walls offered cover, and a trickle of water seeped from a crack into a pool. He tethered the horse, spread a blanket for the boy, and knelt to strike a small fire hidden between stones. The boy watched him with wary eyes. Finally, in the hush of dusk, the cowboy spoke. "You know who they are, don't you?" The boy hesitated, chewing his lip. "Men with red scarves. They ride fast. They burn." His voice shook. "They killed my papa last spring. Mama said we had to keep moving, but they always found us." The cowboy froze, flint in hand. Red scarves. He knew that sign. The Delgado gang. Outlaws who rode from Texas up into New Mexico, leaving charred farms and empty graves behind them. He had heard their name whispered in saloons, spoken in anger and fear. And now one of their orphans was huddled under his coat. "They want you," the cowboy said flatly. The boy nodded. "Mama said they wouldn't stop." He pulled his knees to his chest, eyes glinting with both fear and shame. "She told me I was the reason they chased us." The cowboy swallowed hard. That kind of burden could break a grown man, let alone a child. He reached across the fire, his rough voice softer. "Listen, kid. Whatever they're after, it ain't your fault. You hear me? You didn't choose this." The boy sniffled, nodding faintly, though doubt lingered in his gaze. They ate in silence. Jerky and a few beans warmed in the fire. As darkness settled thick, the cowboy doused the flames, leaving only embers. The desert stretched wide, silvered under the moon, and the night air carried the faint echo of hooves. The boy stirred, whispering, "They're close." The cowboy rose, revolver in hand. He climbed the canyon wall and peered over the rim. Across the desert, shadows moved. "Wait," he said finally. "And if they come too close, we move." The night dragged, tense and brittle. Every sound sharpened. The creak of saddle leather, the sigh of the horse, the boy's uneven breathing. The cowboy sat with revolver across his knees, eyes fixed on the shadows beyond the canyon rim. Then, faint but clear, a whistle cut the night. Not a bird, not the wind, a signal, answered by another and another. The boy stiffened. That's them. The cowboy's heart thudded slow and heavy. He rose, motioning the boy behind the rocks. "Stay down. Don't move unless I say." Moments later, riders appeared at the canyon mouth. The moonlight glinted off pistols, off knives, off the red scarves tied at their throats. The gang rode with the swagger of wolves scenting blood. One man dismounted, tall and broad-shouldered, his face hidden in shadow beneath a wide hat. His voice carried, rough and mocking. "We know you're in there. Hand over the boy, and maybe we'll let you walk away." The cowboy stepped from the rocks, revolver steady at his side. His voice was low, even. "Ain't no boy here, just me." The outlaw chuckled, a sound like gravel. "Don't play dumb, friend. That brat belongs to us." The cowboy's jaw tightened. "He belongs to no one." A murmur ran through the riders, part amusement, part threat. The leader spat in the dust. "Then you've made your choice." The standoff stretched, the desert wind cold against sweat on the cowboy's neck. Behind him, he heard the boy's sharp breath, a reminder of what was at stake. The leader drew his pistol with a flash of steel. In the same instant, the cowboy raised his revolver. The night exploded in gunfire, the sound rolling like thunder through the canyon. The boy clapped his hands over his ears, crouching low, as sparks lit the rocks and bullets screamed into the stone. Horses reared, men shouted, and the desert moon bore witness to the beginning of a battle neither side intended to lose. And in that moment, the lonely cowboy knew. The cry he had heard in the desert was not the end of his solitude. It was the start of a war. Gunfire echoed in the canyon like thunder trapped in stone. The cowboy crouched behind a jagged boulder, revolver hot in his hand, the acrid stench of powder burning his lungs. The boy, huddled against the rock behind him, hands clamped to his ears, eyes wide with terror. Bullets sparked off stone, whining past in angry ricochets. The outlaws shouted as they pressed forward, their voices rising in drunken confidence. "Hand over the brat," one bellowed. "He ain't worth your life, stranger." The cowboy gritted his teeth, wiping blood from a shallow cut across his brow. He had been outnumbered before, but never with another soul depending on him. He fired, dropping one rider from his saddle. The man crumpled in the dust, scarf slipping from his throat. Another outlaw cursed, spurring forward only to be driven back by a volley of shots. The boy whimpered. The cowboy turned, eyes hard but steady. "Stay low, kid." The boy nodded, tears streaking his dirt-caked cheeks. His small frame shook with every burst of gunfire. The cowboy leaned out, firing again. His revolver clicked empty. With practiced hands, he reloaded, each motion deliberate despite the chaos. His mind raced. He could fight to the bitter end here, but when the last bullet was spent, the boy would be left to their mercy. And men who wore red scarves showed none. A voice rose above the din, sharp and commanding, the leader. "Enough waste and powder, smoke 'em out." The cowboy's gut clenched. He knew what that meant. Torches flared, their flames licking hungrily at the desert wind. Soon smoke would pour into the canyon, driving him and the boy from cover. He could ride hard and hope to break through their line, but the horse was tired, and the boy too weak to endure a long chase. His choices narrowed to two: surrender the boy and live, or fight to protect him and die. He glanced back. The child looked at him, eyes pleading, not for survival but for belonging. The cowboy's chest tightened. He had ridden alone so long he had forgotten the weight of another's trust. Now it lay on him like iron. "Kid," he said hoarsely, "if we get out of this, you stick close to me. Understand?" The boy nodded fiercely. The cowboy holstered his revolver and pulled his rifle from the saddle scabbard. He braced it across the rock, drawing a bead on the torch-bearers. The flames made them easy targets. He squeezed the trigger. One torch dropped, tumbling into the sand. He fired again, and another outlaw crumpled, flames sputtering in the dirt. The gang roared in fury, gunfire flashing brighter. Horses screamed, dust rising thick to his feet. Time to move. They scrambled toward the horse. Bullets tore the dust around their boots. The cowboy lifted the boy into the saddle and swung up behind him, spurring the mare hard. The animal bolted, foam flecking her mouth, hooves pounding. The outlaws shouted, giving chase. Gunfire blazed across the night. A bullet tore through the cowboy's hat brim. Another grazed his arm. He gritted his teeth, holding the boy close with one arm, steering with the other. The desert stretched ahead, silver beneath the moon. The cowboy drove the horse toward a narrow ravine he had glimpsed earlier. The walls rose steep and dark, offering a chance to lose pursuit. But it was a gamble. If the ravine dead-ended, they would be trapped. Behind them, hoofbeats thundered, the gang closing in. The boy clung to him, whispering through sobs, "Don't let them take me." The cowboy's heart hardened. They won't. They plunged into the ravine, shadows swallowing them whole. The horse's hooves clattered on stone, sparks flying. The walls narrowed, rising higher. The outlaws followed, their shouts echoing. Then, salvation or doom. The ravines split into two paths. One wound upward toward open desert, narrow but climbable. The other plunged deeper into blackness where moonlight could not follow. The cowboy had seconds to choose. The boy's life hung on his decision. He pulled the reins hard, turning toward the path that climbed. Stones slid under the horse's hooves, but she clawed upward, scrambling with desperate strength. Bullets ricocheted around them, chips of rock stinging their faces. At last, they burst free onto a high ridge. The desert spread wide below, silver in moonlight, endless and merciless. The cowboy drew the mare to a halt, chest heaving. He turned to look back. The outlaws were climbing too, relentless, scarves whipping in the wind. The leader's voice rang out, mocking. "You can't run forever, cowboy." That boy's ours. The cowboy raised his revolver, his silhouette etched in silver light, his voice carried like iron. Not while I breathe. The standoff was not over. But in that moment, on that ridge beneath the cold desert moon, the cowboy made his choice clear. He would fight, not for glory, not for survival, but for the boy who had cried in the desert and changed his fate forever. The ridge lay silver under the desert moon, jagged rocks cutting the sky like broken teeth. The cowboy sat astride his weary mare, revolver heavy in his hand, the boy clutched close to his chest. Below, the Delgado gang spread out like wolves, red scarves snapping in the wind as they urged their mounts up the incline. The leader rode ahead, hat low, voice booming across the canyon. "You can't ride forever, cowboy. That brat carries a debt, and we've come to collect it." The boy stiffened in the cowboy's arms, whispering, "They'll kill us." The cowboy lowered his head, voice rough but steady. "Not tonight." The gang surged upward. The cowboy spurred his mare higher along the ridge, weaving through boulders as bullets sparked against stone. He fired back, each shot deliberate, forcing riders to scatter. The boy clung tighter, burying his face against the cowboy's chest, trusting him as if no bullet could pierce that bond. The ridge narrowed to a knife edge. One misstep would send horse and riders plunging into the ravine below. The cowboy's breath came hard, sweat stinging his eyes, but he pressed forward. The boy's life depended on his will to hold steady. A shot rang out. The mare stumbled, screaming, a bullet grazing her flank. She lurched, but the cowboy steadied her, urging her on with iron in his voice. "Easy, girl. Don't you give in." Behind, the gang whooped, sensing blood. The leader raised his pistol, firing into the sky, his laughter rolling like thunder. The cowboy reached a plateau at the ridge's peak. The land stretched endless before him, an ocean of sand under a sea of stars. There was nowhere to hide, nowhere to run. Only dust, blood, and the choice to fight. He dismounted, pulling the boy behind a slab of stone. His revolver was nearly empty. He counted the weight of the bullets in his palm. 3 left. He met the boy's eyes. "When I say run, you run. Don't look back." The boy shook his head fiercely. "Not without you." The cowboy's heart twisted. "You've got more years in you than me. That's reason enough." But before either could speak again, the gang crested the ridge. Shadows against moonlight, red scarves snapping like banners of war. The leader pointed his pistol, voice booming. "Last chance, stranger. Hand over the kid, or both of you die where you stand." The cowboy rose slowly, revolver at his side. His voice carried like steel across the plateau. "Come and take him." The gang roared and charged. Gunfire tore the night. The cowboy dropped the first rider with a single shot, the second with another. Dust and sparks filled the air, horses screaming, bullets whistling. He fired his last round at the leader, the bullet grazing his hat and sending him reeling back in fury. Click. Empty. The cowboy threw the revolver aside. Knew this ridge could hold only one victor. The boy screamed, scrambling forward, grabbing the fallen revolver from the dust. With trembling hands, he pointed it at the outlaw's back. The leader froze, laughter echoing cruelly. "You don't have the guts, boy." The cowboy's voice cut through the night. "Don't do it, kid. Don't let them turn you into what they are." The boy's eyes welled with tears, his small body shaking. He lowered the revolver, dropping it into the dust. The leader sneered and raised his blade, only for the cowboy to drive his knife home, the strike swift and final. The outlaw collapsed, red scarf dark with blood. Silence fell, broken only by the wind. The remaining riders reined back, uncertainty flashing in their eyes. Leaderless, their fury faltered. One by one they turned their horses, retreating into the desert night. The cowboy stood, chest heaving, knife slick in his hand. He looked at the boy, who trembled but stood tall, refusing to cry. Slowly the cowboy knelt, resting a hand on his shoulder. "You did right. Don't ever doubt that." The boy nodded, his voice a whisper. "We're still alive." The cowboy's gaze drifted over the endless horizon. "For now. But life out here don't give gifts. We'll have to fight for every mile." He sheathed his knife, lifted the boy onto the mare, and mounted behind him. Together they rode down from the ridge, the desert wind carrying the scent of blood and smoke. The moon lit their path, silver and cold. Yet between the two of them burned something stronger than fire. Trust. Fragile but unbreakable. And as the night stretched on, the lonely cowboy no longer rode for himself. He rode for the orphan who had cried in the desert, and for the bond they had forged in dust and blood.